Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sam, one of the account managers here at Domino Data Lab. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. So we're going to go into introductions and cover off who Arthur de Little are. Then we're going to be hearing more about the case studies that Arthur de Little have been working on within AI and ML. We're then going to follow up with a introduction and demo of Domino Data Lab's data science platform, and then we're going to finish off with Q&A. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Greg.
Hi, everyone. Great to be able to present this webinar jointly with Domino. And before we get into who Arthur D. Little is, maybe a little bit about who I and Michael are. I'm Greg Smith, managing partner with ADL, as we like to call ourselves. And I founded and run what we describe as the digital problem solving practice, which is a group of 40 or so individuals, primarily based out of London, but working globally across the Arthur D. Little footprint. My background, I've been doing this, as you might guess, from the grey hair for quite a long time. And my career has been split roughly 50-50 between industry, leadership roles and management consulting. I also sit on the ADL Global XCOM, where I'm responsible for innovation overall. And, you know, what do I do and what's my passion? It's applying leading edge digital technologies to actually drive real business transformation and, most importantly, unlock value, significant value. So, Michael, can I hand over to you?
Thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. My name's Michael Iden. I'm a computer scientist by training, and I've spent the last, even slightly more than 20 years at the interface of computer science, machine learning, but also applied problems, mostly in life science and healthcare. And during that time, I've worked in different settings. I worked in academic settings. I worked in a startup settings and in different countries. But one thing is like a red thread through all of these activities, the passion for problem solving, and doing that with cutting edge AI technologies. And right now, like Greg already said, I'm leading the AI and machine learning sub-team within DPS. We're roughly 20 of the 40 people in the entire team. Nice to be here.
So firstly, let's start with who is Arthur D. Little. This might be a name that many of you are unfamiliar with, but if we move on to the next slide, we do have a global claim to fame in that we are the world's first management consulting firm. There's a picture on the left-hand side of our esteemed founder, Arthur de Little, who in 1886 decided he could tell chemical businesses how to run their factories better, and managed to invent management consulting. So I don't know whether we should be grateful or hateful for his contribution to society. We're about 40 offices. We're a genuinely global business. We stretch from Tokyo to San Francisco, with most places in the in the consulting heavy world in between. And we're about 1,500 consultants, who all have a passion for being at the cutting edge of innovation and dealing with the difficult problems. We're not the guys you call if you've got a traditional or well understood problem. We're the people that you call if it's as we describe it, an intractable problem. We also believe passionately in this thing we call open consulting, which is, trying to bring the best brains to bear on a problem, not just the best brains that happen to be on our payroll. And we can reach out to, whatever the number is a lot of people who, we can find and then connect into our projects. So that's Arthur D. Little, the firm. What about this digital problem solving division that Michael and I are part of? Well, what we try to do, and we work globally across all markets and industries within ADL, but what we try and do is we try and bring business consultants, architects, data scientists, and engineers together. And whilst I wouldn't pretend to say we're unique, I think we've got some things that individually are quite rare and in combination are very rare. So, starting from the left, we believe in applying disruptive digital models. You know, those technologies and approaches and ways of working that are proven at the Netflixes and the Googles and the Amazons and the startups of this world, not the technologies that happen to be in the top right-hand corner of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We ally our technical and technological background with some of the best of consulting, and that we describe as rigorous creativity, that sort of analytic approach and problem-solving approach, and evidence gathering. I think everyone says this, impactful delivery. We are agile, but we believe in agile as a philosophy, not agile as a religion. So we work with emergence and adaptation and imprecise scope and setting off on a journey before you know the outcome, but we're not wedded to any particular methodology. And I've already mentioned open consulting. You know, how do we find the right skills and scale our teams based on the best skills available, you know, in the world, not just within our boundaries. So honing in a little bit on the AI and machine learning team, which is, I guess, what everyone on this call is most interested in. Michael leads it, and it's currently 18 data scientists. We're at the cutting edge of data science, and you know that's indicated by the proportion of PhDs within that data science team. It's also highly multinational, and that combination of academic background, multinationality, is and people who've basically worked at the cutting edge of data science because that's what their research required, whether it's linguistics or energy or actually pure mathematics. You know, it's all about how did people learn to bring data science to bear on their research, and then many, you know, mainly they discovered that they preferred that to the actual academic side of it. But it's only as good as the framework that you put that data science into. So we see AI and machine learning as part of a wider ecosystem, that it definitely involves data engineering, involves what we describe as data as a service, which is how do you bring the best open data and harness it and bring it into the problem that you're trying to solve. Data storytelling, so how do you make the insights actionable and understandable to the executives who are tasked with making the difference and delivering the value? And then obviously that's underpinned by, you know, how do you do projects, how do you deliver outcomes, how do you structure things? And last and certainly not least, it's underpinned by the Domino Data Lab platform, which is the single data science environment that all of this team work and collaborate across. And it's really important because we talk about data science as a team sport, and so it's important that they have a frictionless environment to carry out their work and interact. So just to summarize, you know, what we do with AI and machine learning is threefold. We apply it to solving real world, intractable client problems that unlock real value. We use it to turn ideas into solutions. And increasingly, we're applying it to ourselves, and we're using it to drive our own internal innovation and productivity. So, you know, not only is the AI and machine learning team a key part of our external client-facing capability, but it's also helping us improve our internal capability. And with that, I'll let Michael go into some of the specifics of how we do that in the healthcare space.
Thanks very much, Craig. So before I go into more details, I really want to set the scene what is, you know, affecting, you know, the pharmaceutical industry, you know, as a whole. And this graph here highlights the productivity of pharma R&D over the last couple of decades. And what we see here is really what we would call almost a mega trend. It's becoming more and more harder and more costly to bring new drugs to the market. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, some of the low-hanging fruits, especially when you think about antibiotics, they have been discovered early on. It's get much harder to find new targets. Also, there's more and more regulation at place that requires pharma companies to, you know, do more research and you know, put more effort into developing their drugs. And also, we have more and more data at our fingerprints. We generate more and more insights as science accelerates that complicates the picture and complicates the way new drugs have to be designed. Now, the open question here is, can AI help kind of balancing out this trend or maybe even reverting this trend going forward? We strongly believe so that is possible. I want to move on to the next slide, please, and dive it a little bit into where we see applications of AI already emerging. So as you can imagine, bringing new drugs to the market is a very risk-prone business. There are a lot of failures in this business. In other words, lots of molecules and drug candidates never make it to the patient. So in other words, you have a lot of basic research, you have a lot of drug discovery and basic experimentation in the lab before your drug candidates first encounter human being in clinical trials. And even after the clinical trials, of course, the efficacy of the drug will be estimated, and then there's regulatory steps until the drug gets to the market. So there are a lot of failures at different processes along this timeline. And some of these timelines can be very long. When we think about cancer drugs, it can take up to 10 years to move from the left to the right. We specifically within ADL, we focus on AI in clinical trials, so the section in the middle, and there's several reasons for that. First of all, it's still slightly underrepresented in terms of AI. We see quite a lot of exciting stuff happening to the left of this, but we also see there's a lot of operational aspects involved in here. So you're actually running a trial in the real world that has supply chain aspects, it has kind of monitoring aspects, that also has quite a lot of intrinsic data fragmentation because there are different players at place. There might be CROs, there might be healthcare providers, and the pharma company. It's also quite difficult to monitor these processes because you don't have direct insights on what's happening on the ground. So that's our sweet spot. This is where we've developed a couple of AI models. There's a few applications to the right of it after the drugs are on the market, but I will not talk about this in the context of this talk. I want to highlight how, using the same analogy, how we plan to use AI and how we plan to accelerate AI in the clinical trial space. So first of all, we'd like to widen this funnel by kind of avoiding, let's say, operational mistakes that are not related to the efficacy of the drug. So kind of use AI to streamline and optimize the trial execution and such. And also by doing so, reduce the amount of time that is needed to execute all of these different phases of clinical trials. So if you use the metaphor of a funnel, we'd like to widen and also shrink the funnel in the time dimension to get more throughput through it as a function of time, as a unit of time. But now, next, I want to highlight some of the AI models that we've built and how we want to do it, or how we're doing it currently. So we see that pharma companies are sitting on a lot of internal data that is often structured. So it's clear, numerical, it's part of experimentation that have been done in the lab. So it's sitting in some spreadsheets or in some database. But we also know that these companies operate in the real world. There's other players out there that try to run clinical trials for the same type of patients, targeting the same conditions. And we're regularly and routinely incorporate structured and unstructured data in our solutions. We're incorporating internal sensitive data with external open source data. And we also, given the fact that there are so many uncertainties in the context of developing drugs, we've changed our viewpoint from being deterministic to probabilistic. So the probabilistic aspect of modeling and also of machine learning underpins everything that we're doing because it fits the sheer nature of the problem type. There's things that are uncertain, but we can to some extent embrace and model that uncertainty with narrower boundaries and provide better decision-making to the decision makers and our client side. The next slide, I want to very briefly discuss the ecosystem of AI models that we've built for a client. I know it's a little bit abstract, I can't go into too much detail here, but you can imagine that we've built models that kind of target the enrollment of patients onto trials. We've built social media platforms that listen into what are prospective patients talking about on social media. We helped our client also to find the best possible sites and countries to go into to run the operations. This utilizes quite a lot of external data sets. And also we're helping our client to better manage their financial and resource forecasting algorithms so they're better prepared operationally to manage a quite complicated portfolio of clinical trials. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of different machine learning under the hood here. It uses quite a variety of different approaches, from graph-based machine learning to the probabilistic Bayesian approaches, which are more or less sitting everywhere, to some aspects of reinforcement learning and scenario modeling that underpin some of these models. But also it's important to call out that some of these models are interconnected. So the output of one model gets fed into a different model as one of the many inputs. And here we're utilizing the API capabilities that Domino provides out of the box. It makes it very easy for us to create an ecosystem of AI models that incorporate internal and external data sets, but can also talk to each other and are connected also to feedback loops. In the next few slides, I want to drill into some of these aspects in a little bit more detail and bring them to life. So you see, a bit more detail what we've done and what value we deliver to the client. If we move on to the next slide, I'm quickly talking about the COVID forecasting algorithm that we've built. I mean, as we're all very much aware, COVID's been with us now for 2 years. The nature of the pandemic has changed throughout. In the beginning, we didn't have any vaccines, and the phenomenon was truly driven by the virus alone. And we helped our clients to better forecast and model the disruption caused by COVID-19 in 50 different geographies around the globe throughout the last 2 years. In the beginning, it was, the models were more epidemiological and statistics. Now they are more machine learning driven and they incorporate a wide plethora of different data input sets. But this system has helped the client to adjust their operations on the ground. They made decisions based on this model to avoid or go into certain geographies where the COVID incidence was low and certain patient population was available. And this system is also an input into other algorithms. So the output that this model produces programmatically gets consumed by other decision-making systems. So it's sitting at the lowest level of this ecosystem I've mentioned earlier. And we've benchmarked our model against some other external, available models like MIT, etc. And we have seen better performance in our internal model than we've seen, for example, with the MIT model. Next slide, slightly different problem, but it gives you a flavor for the different problem types we're dealing with. So we helped our client here to better understand the context around abdominal aortic aneurysms. So this is a disease that roughly 2.2 million Americans have, but it's often only discovered post-mortem that a person has that underlying disease. But it's another incidence where this disease is discovered is as a consequence of road traffic accidents where patients undergo a routine body scan. Now, since in the pandemic, we had much less traffic on the roads, we had much less traffic accidents. So our client was aware that there's an underdiagnosed part of the population out there which have this risk, which did not have a full body scan. So we tapped into social media, we tapped into several social media feeds to understand and find if patients are complaining about individuals complain about certain symptoms that could be projected on a geographical distribution or a geographical map. So the whole idea was here to go out there to advertise for the actual free full body scan that is available for any adult in the United States in the help of identifying these underlying diseases earlier in time that have not been discovered through the unfortunate consequence of having had a road traffic accident. Again, an example here where the pandemic completely changed the way we operate as human beings and where AI and machine learning can come in to provide quick and reliable insights. I want to go to another case study, which is probably one of the most fascinating ones that we have in the team. As all of you are aware, it is very difficult to diagnose certain diseases because they are intrinsically rare, but also because they manifest quite differently and it can manifest in different organs. So we're helping one client here to what we call pre-ident potential patients that might develop a very rare and a very difficult to diagnose disease. So currently, when these patients are often diagnosed, they're diagnosed at a very late stage where they on average have another year or 13 months to live. So it's a very rare disease that's very debilitating. And we're using concepts of graph-based machine learning and NLP and probabilistic modeling to analyze historical patient trajectories, patient diagnosis and lab data, where we have a confirmed diagnosis to see, can we find any signals earlier in the time that might be indicative that this patient is actually on a trajectory to develop this very difficult disease. What this hopefully will allow us to do is help our client and the healthcare providers that we're working with to identify these people early in time, have them screened more thoroughly, have them analyzed, have them also being assessed by different specialists. But of course, what we've often seen, depending where you enter the healthcare system and what specialist you speak in first, it might determine to some extent what your outcome is, because depending on what background they bring in, they look at the manifestation of the symptoms in a certain way. And this is, like I said, coupling different types of machine learning approaches, cutting edge NLP to extract patient records that been anonymized, obviously, graph-based modeling, temporal modeling, but also classical approaches from statistics like survival analysis have all been incorporated into a complex suite of machine learning models. And this is, within our team, one of the most fascinating, one of the most complex type of problems, because as we all know, biology is difficult. Human beings are, go about, do all kind of things. There's lots of signals in that database that are unrelated to the question. So we have to find really a needle in the haystack here. And with this, I'd like to close this quick excursion into some of these case studies. I'm happy to answer any questions that relate to the 3 of the case studies, but also to some of the other things that we've mentioned. And would like to hand it back to Sam and Brian for the demo.
Thank you, Michael. So what I wanted to do, everyone, was just to give a very quick introduction into who Domino is, what we do, and some of the customers that we work with, and then we're going to go into an actual live high-level overview demonstration. But essentially, so who is Domino? So Domino helps organizations, some of the largest enterprises out there, to unleash data science across the enterprise. So we work with over 20% of the Fortune 100 as of today. And historically, we have worked with the more regulated industries. So the health and life sciences of the industries of the world, companies, I should say, sorry, financial services and so on. But as you can see with some of the logos on the screen, we work with a vast variety from manufacturing, travel and tourism through to retail as well. And effectively, what we're providing is a system of record for data science. So you'll be very familiar with the Salesforces of the world for CRM and sales, the Oracles and SAPs for finance, and Marketo for marketing, and so on. Domino is here to provide a system of record for data science. So for all data science activities, jobs, projects, models, everything is powered and operationalized in Domino as a system of record. One thing I wanted to highlight, so a lot of enterprises out there, a lot of organizations, they do look to either Forrester or Gartner for advice and tips on which vendors are out there at the moment, which consultancy companies, etc., are doing well effectively. So Forrester, around 12 to 15 months ago, they interviewed 6 of our customers across 6 different industries, and effectively summarized some of the key ROIs and value propositions for Domino. This total economic impact report is accessible online and will be shared with everyone as a follow-up email anyway. But as you can see on the top right, on average, a customer that implements Domino after the first 6 months will receive a 542% ROI, benefits of 24 million, an MPV score of 20.2 million, and payback for actually purchasing Domino in under 6 months. And some of the variables that they looked at, you can see at the bottom, from reducing time to configure compute resources all the way to reduced infrastructure costs, was just some of the variables that were looked at as value drivers. Typically, we speak to hundreds of customers on a monthly basis, and there's a real common theme of why we hear organizations are struggling to scale data science. The first one is really geared around infrastructure friction. So as a data scientist, as an analyst, as a data engineer, you're not able to access the required tools and scalable compute. This effectively creates shadow IT and creates operational security risks, which results into high support costs and multiple tool stacks and bespoke hardware, which as a result slows down innovation for the organization. The next one is around limited collaboration. So it's hard to collaborate with other data scientists and business stakeholders. You can't find and reuse past work, so there's lots of reinventing the wheel, no standard way of working. As a result, this wastes time and effort. And the last challenge that we see on a regular basis is around productionization. So tracking and managing experiments is manual and time consuming. It's hard to track projects and progress. Model deployment, it takes months. And model monitoring and governance is either inconsistent or non-existent, which, as you can imagine, really delays business impact. So we believe enterprise MLOps can accelerate data science. And with Domino, we'll go into this more in the actual demo itself. but we're enabling organizations data science teams to develop, deploy, monitor, and manage all models and data science and the data science lifecycle, all the way through R&D through to production. And we're doing this at enterprise scale in a safe and universal way. So if we look back at the first slide where I shared, we work with some of the most highly regulated industries that are regulated on either a monthly or a quarterly basis, so the healthcare and the financial services of the world. So Domino is extremely safe and secure, and it has a top of the state-of-the-art governance and security functionality to support those regulated industries. So how do we do this? So if you can just imagine the blue and purple image in the middle where you have the Domino Enterprise MLOps platform. Again, as I mentioned, so you're able to manage, develop, deploy, and monitor all data science processes through experimentation through to production with a real powerful knowledge management feature built into the platform. How we do this is because number one, we're open and flexible, so you can use any tool or infrastructure you want. So Domino doesn't ask you to choose a particular vendor or a particular data source or a particular language. It's completely open and flexible. It's built for teams, so you're able to reproduce work and compound knowledge, so no more reinventing the wheel. Integrated workflows, so you can really reduce the friction across the whole end-to-end life cycle from ideation all the way through to deployment. And then lastly, you do this at enterprise scale, so you can safely and universally scale data science across the enterprise. And lastly, just to add, so Domino runs on Kubernetes, so that effectively means you can deploy Domino on either your NVIDIA tech stack, AWS, wherever it may be, Azure, GCP, it doesn't matter. You can do this at scale as Domino runs on Kubernetes. I think that's a nice segue into an actual product demonstration. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Sam. What I'm going to do in terms of the demonstration is kind of echo some of the things that Sam talked about here. So those common challenges that we see around infrastructure friction, productionization challenges, and limited collaboration. So the first one of these then, to solve this kind of first challenge of infrastructure friction, Domino automates all of the DevOps tasks required for research and development of data science work. So this includes provisioning the compute resources and managing the self-service sandbox with the different tools and software that data science teams need. So if we move across into the Domino platform, so as Sam said, this is based on Kubernetes, so it can live in any public or private cloud. And when I launched the UI, I logged in through my single sign-on, facility. So it's kind of linked in with enterprise security as well. So let's say in this particular example, we've been tasked with building a model to predict individuals' likelihood of getting type 1 diabetes. So the first thing that I may need to do is to go into a model development environment. So I have one running here, or I could potentially start a new one. And what we'll see when we load this up is that I have access to a number of different technologies in terms of what I may want to do my development work in. So I've got a wide variety of different compute frameworks, and these can be everything from the older technologies like SAS and MATLAB through to some of the open source frameworks like JupyterLab or RStudio. And with Domino, it can all be done within the single platform. So if I have different users collaborating on a project who have different preferences here or are working from different technology stacks, that can all be done without switching from one platform to another. And so Domino is really the only open tool and language agnostic MLOps platform in that sense. And part of this is because we know that the data science ecosystem is innovating really rapidly. So we want to provide a future-proof solution. As new tools and technologies come out, they can be easily added to the Domino platform itself. So with a couple of clicks, I can come through and I can start a development environment. And we can see that all of my code and all of my data will be pulled in to this particular environment. But not only that, I'm actually also using a Ray cluster here with a number of GPUs attached to it. And I'm not sure if anyone on the call has tried to set up kind of distributed frameworks like Spark or Ray, but they can be significantly difficult to configure. Whereas Domino has actually done all of that for me just in this couple of clicks. And this is important because if I had to configure this myself, I get caught in that kind of no-win situation where I either have to become an expert in configuring this type of infrastructure, or I have to rely on one in my wider team. So having the Domino platform be able to do all of that IT work for me saves me a huge amount of time, and I can focus in on developing my model. So without having to know anything about the cloud, Kubernetes, compute frameworks, I now have all of the tools that I need to start building my diabetes prediction model. So I can come in here and I can put in some data. I can start doing some data analysis and start training new versions of my model. And while IDEs are fantastic for doing this kind of development and experimentation, another aspect of the platform is the ability to run experimentation in a tracked way as well. So Domino's experiment management gives you the ability to execute many experiments in parallel and to be able to track and organize that work as well. So here I have the same ability as the workspace in that I can come in and I can run based on different hardware tiers that I may have access to. I can use different compute clusters as well, all to start these jobs. So again, I've got lots of flexibility as to how I use that underlying compute resources, again, without having to be an expert in those IT aspects. So the ability to kind of spin up and spin down those distributed compute clusters eliminates the challenges that come from shared compute clusters as well. You know, I don't need to log into a remote a server and kind of queue my job and wait for it to run because I'm fighting with my peers over limited resources. I can do that all through the Domino user interface. As I proceed through my experiments, you can see along the top here that I'm actually kind of tracking all of those different experiments and the different results that I'm getting from those. So if I come in and have a look at the details of any of these experiments, I can see specifically what was run. I can see the code, the data, the Docker image, the parameters that make up this particular experiment. And all of that is stored automatically. So that means that it's very easy to compare results from one to another. And it's also vital to have all of these things stored such that if I want to work collaboratively on this project with other people, they can see the types of experimentation that we've already done. And we start to save time by not reinventing the wheel. It's also very important if you work within a regulated industry as well, because you can actually use this kind of time machine functionality to be able to explain how particular models were trained, how particular decisions were made, which is great for kind of regulatory compliance purposes as well. I can also collaboratively interact with these as well. So I can come in here and I can put comments against particular experiments. I can start to tag these experiments to make them easier to find as well. So if I wanted to add in kind of searchability, I could add in tags related to these particular experiments. Now that we've built that model, we've used the Domino platform to kind of automate some of the underlying DevOps. You know, no need to configure those compute clusters ourselves. Self-service access to all of the tools and technology that we need. And self-service access to those development environments as well in a way that can be shared amongst team members. So then we may run into the next kind of archetypal bucket of challenges around the productionization of models. And the productionization of models generally means putting your model into some consumable format, like an application or an API, and getting it hosted somewhere as part of a production system. in a way that needs to be scalable and also monitored as well. And we see a lot of companies having challenges at this stage. So they don't necessarily have repeatable processes, let alone any automation, and have to rely on handoff between data scientists and someone in an ops team. And this can cause some of the longest delays in getting value from a model, because sometimes the code needs to be refactored in terms of being able to be supported by that DevOps team. And so to streamline this process, Domino actually allows individual data scientists to self-publish their models and APIs. So here we can see that I have my diabetes prediction model, which I've wrapped as an API. So Domino simply needs to understand where the particular model is within my project, and then it can do all of the infrastructure lift in terms of creating this as an API that can be served out to business processes or business applications. I can track multiple versions of these APIs as well. And for each of these versions, I'm kind of keeping tabs of the particular code that goes into it and the data that was trained. And for each of these, I can very easily change the infrastructure that this runs on as well. So I can come in and I can scale this out to run on more instances if I'm seeing more load on this particular API. I can also come in and very easily set the settings around, how this API is going to be invoked and how it can be consumed by those end users. So we're making it very easy for the data science teams themselves to actually deploy this, rather than having to go through complex IT ticketing services to get the infrastructure stood up and deployed. Similarly, as a data scientist, I can come in and I can deploy applications, things like Shiny, Flask, and Dash applications. And again, I don't need to learn Kubernetes to be able to deploy any of these things. I can simply do this through the user interface. Even coming in and setting things like the permissions on who in my organization can actually access this application, which then gives me the ability to invite the business stakeholders as part of the process to come in and see the progress that we've made on this particular model. So if I open up this application, I could share this out with the other members of the project team, as well as the business stakeholders that we're working with. So when this loads up, we'll be able to see my diabetes prediction app, where I can come in here, I can change some of these values and then predict whether a person that falls within this category is likely to get diabetes. And this has greatly improved the ability for our customers' data science teams to be more responsive and more directly add value to the business. So now that I've published my models in production, the next part of this is then to actually monitor those for their effectiveness over time. So Domino also has a model monitoring capability, which allows me to monitor all of the models that I have in production across the organization. So I'm here able to monitor models for things like data drift, to let me know if the production data is no longer compatible with the data that was used for training the models. And as Michael kind of referred to earlier, at the moment, with the changes to many different ecosystems that COVID has brought along, this kind of ability to understand how our production data is different from the data that we've trained our models on, it is particularly relevant. And it can also model the quality of our models as well. So by comparing the predictions that we've made through these models to the ground truth data that we have, we can see if a model is actually performing effectively against the predictions that we're expecting it to make. And we can set up alerting around this as well, such that if any of our models turn red in a health status, as they are here, I'll receive a notification indicating that I need to come into the tool and easily retrain and republish those models. So at Domino, we believe that MLOps should cover the entire life cycle of your model, all the way from ideation and development through to monitoring in production. So in terms of the productionization challenges then, Domino helps that with being able to self-publish things like apps and APIs to reduce the friction in terms of getting those models out into the ecosystem. And then integrated monitoring to make sure that the things that are there are looked after effectively. And the last piece of this then is around the limited collaboration that teams often see. So within the tool, there are a number of different collaborative functions that I've shown you already. So there are things like the ability to document the projects and make them shareable and searchable as well. So I can come in and I can search for other work that's gone on in the diabetes space, and this will show me other projects that are being worked on. So I can use these to draw from experiences across the organization and make sure that I'm not reinventing the wheel. I can also draw people straight into the experimentation that's been done, and I can share with people the results that we have, both in terms of the how individual experimentation has been performed, and also the particular models of interest as well. So this is often enough information for this team to know if they're able to kind of accelerate their own research if they were looking into a diabetes model by evaluating what I've already done within this particular project. And unfortunately, even if you do have a kind of central place to find and fork code that goes with these kind of projects, it doesn't necessarily mean that another team will be able to get your code up and running effectively. So again, another value of the Domino platform here is that the underlying configuration for these things can be shared as well. So I know that anyone who's picking up aspects of this project, all of the different code and experimentation will work for them as well. Then there's also the benefits around the IDEs that I mentioned earlier as well. So again, different data scientists can collaborate using different tools. So if we have data scientists who are more familiar with R, for example, they can collaboratively work in the same space as data scientists who may use MATLAB or Python. So there's lots of different ways in which we make it more seamless for organizations to collaborate together. So from the limited collaboration perspective, by having that centralized platform, it makes it easier for teams to find and reuse past work, as well as publish the work that they've done and share that with other members of the community, and make this more reproducible. So those were the key aspects of the demo that I wanted to talk through today. And I know that we have now kind of a few more minutes to handle any of the questions or comments that have come through.
Thanks, Brian. So we have a question. So can Domino select data first from a data catalog, browse and select cohort from a data catalog in brackets, before it can pull the actual data from data buckets using the APIs?
So Domino has a number of different data source connectors, which allow you to kind of seamlessly connect out to a variety of different data sources. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a UI component of the Domino platform, which is akin to a data catalog in that sense. So you may search in your data catalog tool, find the data that you're looking for, and then pull that into the Domino platform.
Monit, I hope that helps to answer your question.
That's fine. I appreciate that answer. Yes, I was expecting that it won't be able to browse from the data catalog, but if we provide the catalog data, then it can pull it from the respective sources, which may be available within the cohort information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Right. If you go back to your demo, in terms of selection of various compute and workspaces, I think that the challenge would be what if we want to add some more workspaces, if there are others that we would like to add? What is the possibility that Domino is able to add that quickly?
Yeah, so the platform is designed in an open fashion such that you should be able to pull in many different IDEs into the platform. Obviously, it's going to depend on what the specific development environment is that you want. There are always kind of caveats around that. But let's say that one of the larger open source communities comes out with a new IDE tomorrow. The chances are that we would in some way be able to pull that into the platform. And that's really one of the core ethos of Domino is that we want to embrace the open source community and the different innovations that are coming through there, because we feel that that is kind of vital to the success of a platform like this, being able to import new libraries and keep up with that rapidly moving ecosystem.
I may have missed something on the platform, probably when I just stepped out for a moment. Was there a possibility of model performance being analyzed using your platform?
Yeah, so there's a number of different aspects to that. So you can use the jobs functionality to understand the performance of a particular model selection process alongside the parameterization that goes with that. And then once you have a model chosen and in production, you can also monitor that for effectiveness in terms of data drift and model quality as well. So there's kind of two folds to that. One in the experimentation phase to understand the differences between models, and one then in the production phase as well.
Okay, thank you. In terms of productionization challenges that you're talking about, the solution that you're providing as self-publish APIs, are there standard healthcare standard APIs that is being utilized by Domino Labs?
No, not specifically. And this is where organizations like Arthur D. Little come into play, right? In that the Domino platform is providing a general framework for being able to deploy models in that general sense. But then the partners like Arthur D. Little have the expertise to help build out bespoke solutions for particular challenges in that sense, right?
Okay, fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much, everybody, for joining today. We will be sharing a follow-up message to everyone that joined and that couldn't join. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.